qué es lo que piensan ustedes. Nosotros nos vamos ya a preguntar sobre todo esto y mucho más a nuestro invitado internacional, a Lance Roberts, Chief Strategist at Ria Advisors. How are you, Lance, and welcome?
I'm very good. I'm very good today. Thank you.
Well, I would like to start by talking about the investor sentiment. I was just explaining something that hedge funds are very bearish positioning right now, while retail investors are starting to get more bullish during the last weeks. Do you think the sentiment right now can tell us something about the current rally that we are?
Well, yeah, I mean, whenever, investor sentiment, and that's just both retail and professional, so it's not one or the other. But when sentiment gets either really bullish or really bearish, that's normally more towards extremes of markets. So, when you think back to October of last year, everything was about as bearish as we could get. All the views were we're going to have an immediate recession. Nobody wanted to be stocks. We were heavily short positions. Asset allocations were extremely heavy in cash. That provides that ability for markets to rally because it doesn't take a lot of buying to get prices to go up. So even though we've had this nice rally since October, sentiment still remains fairly negative on the bearish side. So that's been kind of feeding into this kind of rally we've had because it keeps pulling more and more of these individuals off the sidelines.
So we can say that this bearish sentiment is like the engine for this rally that we are seeing in the markets. And do you think everything is pricing? Because we are seeing through the investors saying that, well, EPS may contract, but it's already priced in by the market. Do you think there's some possibility that we are not seeing a bigger contraction in the EPS, in the results from the companies?
Well, first of all, if we take a look at, for instance, the EPS, the earnings for quarter one of this year, in May of last year, in 2022, expectations were that companies would earn about $250 a share in this first quarter of 23. We're now down to $172. So we've had a huge contraction in what those estimates were for first quarter. I call this millennial earnings season because we lower the estimate, companies can beat the estimate, so everybody gets a trophy, right? And this is good for the markets. The reality is that earnings have come down a lot. They probably haven't come down enough, but they're low enough now for companies to beat those estimates. So we may get a little bit of a boost out of the earnings announcements. The thing to pay attention to is going to be what companies say about the rest of this year. Are their outlooks improving? They were pretty negative last year. If we start to see improvement in those outlooks, that will help kind of buoy the market here a bit.
I want to ask you also about the next CPI report coming tomorrow. What do you think about the data coming about inflation? Is it going to surprise the investors?
Well, look, I have no idea how the number is going to come out because it's always different than what everybody expects. But reality is that markets are pretty positioned to the short side right now. So if we get a number that suggests, in other words, if CPI comes in below 5% as an example, the market's going to have a fairly strong rally tomorrow because there's so many people short the market at the moment, and a very low reading, a below 5% reading on inflation tomorrow would suggest that the Fed needs to stop hiking rates at this point because inflation is coming down. A number that's above 6%, we may very likely see the market sell off a bit on expectations that the Fed's going to have to hike rates even more than what they're currently pricing in, which is another rate hike in May. So, again, I don't know what the number's going to be, but I think there's a reasonable possibility that we could see this number come in a little bit on the high side because auto prices have been going up, oil prices have been going up. So that's going to feed into this inflation here a bit. So we may see a market have a little bit of struggle tomorrow.
Interesting. And talking about the breadth in the stock market, we saw during the first quarter of 2023 that the big cap names, the mega caps, technological names, were leading this rally with, for example, Apple. Do you think these names can lead the rally, or we should see some strengthening in the mid, small cap names?
Well, I don't know if we're going to see it in the mid to small cap names. If you take a look at the NFIB business survey, which is for small businesses, that's a very negative survey right now. And there's a very high correlation between small business sentiment and small cap stocks. I do think we'll see some rotation out of the technology names into more of the large cap defensive names. Potentially, we're kind of seeing that now. Utilities, real estate recovering, staples, healthcare. We've seen Apple sell off here over the last few days, Microsoft, et cetera. So yeah, the big cap tech names, they made up about 80% of the rally from January the 1st. So again, a bit of cooling there wouldn't be a surprise. A little bit of rotation to some of the other areas of the markets is likely.
And finally, Lance, I want to ask you about the gold. Is the big winner for this year?
Yep. No, gold's doing fine, and that's, part of that has to do with real interest rates, inflation-adjusted interest rates. It also has to do with a lot of the panic, right? There's a lot of people very negative. We're going to have a recession, we're going to lose the value of the dollar, and a lot of this. So that's kind of feeding into that fear trade of gold. That trade is pretty much done here. You may have a little bit more upside in gold prices here in the short term. But if we do see the market beginning to strengthen, we start to see some of this negative sentiment resolve itself, then gold will likely not play well, because we'll see that money rotate from gold, which is a safety play, back into risk of equities.
Very interesting. Lance Roberts, thank you for your time and your analysis, Chief Strategist at Ria Advisors. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bueno, como pueden ver, Lance Roberts de Ria Advisors nos comentaba, lo primero le preguntábamos por el sentimiento, si es un buen indicador para ver cómo está el mercado, ya que hemos visto que los hedge funds están muy posicionados en corto, pues si realmente ese sentimiento nos puede decir algo sobre hacia dónde van a ir los mercados. Bueno, dice Lance que claro, que todo este posicionamiento en corto de los institucionales lo que puede hacer es seguir alimentando el rally en caso de que se den, por ejemplo, buenos datos de inflación. Si mañana resulta que el dato de inflación es mejor de lo esperado, entonces esos cortos van a tener que empezar a cerrar y ahí se puede producir un short squeeze donde vamos a tener todavía más subidas en el índice por ese posicionamiento en corto que estamos viendo. Aún así dice que los indicadores de sentimiento se tienen que usar en los extremos, que tenemos que usarlos realmente cuando hay mucha presión bajista, mucho sentimiento bajista o mucho sentimiento alcista. Ahí es cuando son buenos indicadores de techo o suelo. Por otro lado, le hemos preguntado sobre si cree que los beneficios por acción están completamente descontados. La caída de los beneficios por acción nos ha dicho que obviamente habrá que ir viendo cómo evoluciona, pero que también podría haber sorpresas en cuanto a perspectivas por parte de las empresas. Le hemos preguntado también si el liderazgo tecnológico que hemos visto este primer trimestre del año puede continuar, o si debe continuar, o si va a trasladarse a que las medianas y pequeñas empresas empiecen a hacerlo mejor, que hemos visto bastante atrasadas este tipo de empresas. Bueno, pues nos dice que por ahora lo que ve es una rotación de la tecnología hacia otros sectores, pero que sobre todo van a liderar las grandes empresas, porque todavía el optimismo por las pequeñas sigue siendo muy malo. Aún así, eso irá rotando con el tiempo. Y por último le hemos preguntado si cree que el oro es el gran ganador de este año. Nos dice que no cree, que ese valor, que el dinero del valor refugio poco a poco va a entrar también en los mercados y que eso pues penalizará al oro. Esta ha sido la entrevista con Lance Roberts, recuerdo, Chief Strategist Ria Advisors, donde tienen informes muy interesantes sobre el mercado y sobre lo que está ocurriendo ahora mismo en la economía estadounidense. Vayan a verlo si les interesa.